The Bryan Sam's podcast is sponsored by Church Media HQ. Failing to plan is planning to fail, and many churches have proven this statement to be all too real when it comes to their media and marketing. That's why Luke Clayton and the team at Church Media HQ want to create a 90-day plan to help your church connect with more people. After you share a few details about your church, Luke and his team put together a custom-tailored plan for effectively promoting upcoming events, sermons, and more at your church for free. Whether you choose to hire his team to execute that plan or take that plan and do it yourself, Church Media HQ just wants to see your church connect with more people. And listeners of the Bryan Sam's podcast can get started with a paid membership for as little as $99 and enjoy exclusive discounts on other Church Media HQ services. See the link in the show notes or visit churchmediahq.com/Bryan to sign up for your church's free 90-day media plan today and see all that Church Media HQ can do for your church. That's churchmediahq.com/Bryan. You're listening to an ongoing discussion on life, leadership, and ministry. This is the Bryan Sam's Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bryan Sam's Podcast. This is your host, Bryan Sams. Today, I am excited to be joined by my friend, Pastor Stephen Ashmore. Stephen, welcome to the Bryan Sam's Podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here with you today.
So, Stephen and I have a good history. He's was a part of our church for a while, and then God allowed him to be directed out to Ohio, in the Kings Island area of Ohio. Literally, you're like 5 minutes from Kings Island, at least your church is.
Yeah, right in the backyard of the park.
Yeah, so those of you that don't know, that's like a huge amusement park there, kind of like a Six Flags type place. Great place. So, Stephen, we're going to talk in just a little bit about unique challenges to pastoring a smaller congregation. But before we do that, I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about your story, because really, you have a very similar story to so many guys that are listening to the podcast, and I think your story, both in terms of your history and really some of the more recent things that you went through, getting you to where you are in Ohio. So let's just start. Tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your family.
Sure. So I was raised in a Christian home, saved at an early age, got called to ministry at an early age. So went off to Bible college like most do, and met my wife there at Bible college. We've been married. This is our 20th year, celebrated 20 years in March. Holly, she's been such a wonderful blessing and help in my ministry, such a gift of God. And we have 4 children. My oldest is my only boy. He's in Bible college now. As a matter of fact, Bryan, you're one of his teachers for Old Testament Survey.
I saw that. He actually sent me a text the other day asking me a question. I was like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, so I can't believe I'm old enough to have a college student, but I've got one boy, and then I've got 3 girls, two in high school and one still in elementary school. And they're exciting. They're a fun group of kids to be able to have and minister alongside of.
Absolutely,
here in the church.
And I'm glad our
God's been so good.
Our children are friends. I know my daughter's coming up to see you in November, and she's really close to your girls, and that's exciting. So, okay, I want to talk about give us a little ministry journey after you get out of college, maybe a little bit about the ministry you served in, and then go ahead and tell us kind of what connected us and led us kind of to serve together.
Sure. So I've had I guess you could say, a unique ministry experience in that I got out of college and went straight to Valley Forge Baptist Temple in Pennsylvania, served as a pastoral intern there for about a year and a half. And from that point, the Lord began to move us, seemed to be on a regular basis from ministry to ministry. The look back now, hindsight's 2020. I look back and I see all the experience God gave us in preparation for greater ministry opportunities. So we did that for a number of years. 2012, the Lord led us to Pensacola Christian to be on staff for a few years. And it was during that time and through the experiences God gave us there that the Lord began working in my heart about being a senior pastor, something I never desired, never sought after, but God began showing me and telling me very clearly, this is the direction I want you to go. So in 2016, we accepted the call to a church there in Jacksonville, on the north side of town. It was my first senior pastorate. Got in town about a month before you did.
Yep,
And
that's right.
and so we came into town about the same time. And of course, your first senior pastorate is a major learning experience. You think you know all there is to know about ministry at that point, and you just have scratched the surface.
Right.
And I began to learn that very quickly. We were there for about 3 years, and in June of 2019, our world got turned upside down. And through some conversations, I would even go so far as to say some attacks within the ministry, we felt it was wise to step down from the pastorate there. So I resigned in 2019, in June of 2019, and met with you that Saturday. As a matter of fact, of all the pastors I reached out to in Jacksonville just to let them know what was going on, you were the only one to this day who has reached out to me about it.
Wow.
And so the Lord, through I think through that, and of course, Dr. Stetler coming that weekend, that was a weekend I will never forget.
Yeah. It's
being at River
amazing.
City.
I just want to mention this because our listeners that follow my story, this is the exact same time my church split. And I don't even know if you knew that at the time because you came in just a few weeks after, but you may not felt it exactly. But Dr. Shetler, Jim Shetler was scheduled to be at our church. I called him the week before. This is just so interesting. I called him the week before from Myrtle Beach. I went on a vacation I probably shouldn't have went on. I was just completely devastated. And I called him because our church was literally falling apart. And I said, Dr. Shetler, I just can't have you. I can't afford you. I can't even pay for your plane ticket right now. And he just insisted to come, and at his own expense, his own flight, he wouldn't even accept. I tried to scrape together a love offering, wouldn't even accept it. And that was the weekend. So that's all brewing at the same time. So Satan was certainly on the loose in Jacksonville in 2019.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
and the Lord used his messages. I mean, they were so timely out of Habakkuk to minister to what my family was, still reeling from at that point. So we ended up joining River City Baptist Church. As you know, spent about a year there, and at that point, I didn't know if I would ever go back into pastoral ministry. And I had even made that statement to Holly that I don't think I ever want to be a pastor again. That's the kind of position I was sitting in. But it was through Pastor Shetler's ministry that weekend that God started to heal my heart very quickly towards ministry. And so we dug in at River City, and at that point, I fully expected to be at River City with you for a long time. I had no idea what God was going to do, and through the healing process, the ministry there, the people of the church, and God working, and times that you and I would get together and have some conversations that. One thing led to another, and I remember getting the text one day, I think it was March of 2020, and you texted and said, "Hey, I want you to pray about Kings Mills Baptist Church."
Yeah.
And because the youth pastor here, who is now my youth pastor, was your student, and y'all were talking. And so I did. And about a month later, I put in my resume. That was April, and June of 2020, we came candidated. 2 weeks later, the church voted unanimously to call us.
Amen.
And we have been here just over 2 years now.
That's exciting.
And it's what a ride. The last 3 years of my life have been quite a ride, but I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world.
Amen. So, there's a lot of guys, I even know guys right now going through challenging circumstances, and really There's only two ways to approach it. I mean, you either realize that this is just not going to work, the battle is not going to be kind of worth it trying to turn a ship, or you kind of dig your heels in and fight. And I think as I've watched your story, Stephen, I feel like that while some people I would say you maybe just need to stay and kind of really duke it out, I think what happened to you was there was a bigger narrative going on, and that was
Hmm.
that God was actually shaping and transforming your own philosophy. What
Hmm.
because coming to River City from Victory and from your background would have been a
Yeah.
little cultural shock, a little bit. I mean, I know it's not like you were,
Yeah.
but we were different. We were doing things different. I think it began to help you
Yeah.
to where now
Yeah.
it's like you're pastoring kind of in a different world with different, really, really in health. And
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about your church. You've been there 2 years. Tell us a little bit about like what it was like when you got there and kind of what's going on now.
So this is a unique ministry. So this is actually the smallest church that I have ever been a part of,
Wow.
in my life. We will celebrate 135 years as a church in September, which is really really exciting, really neat. The historic aspect of the church. Um, it has been a very traditional church for most of its existence. Um, and I think most of your listeners probably understand what I mean when I say
Oh, for sure.
traditional.
For sure.
So that's the kind of church it's been. The pastor before me, a wonderful guy, great friend, still nearby in the area, so we were able to communicate somewhat regular basis. Um, he began to lead the church, uh, I think, in a more healthy direction, a more balanced direction, which was a tough road for him. But I'm so thankful because he took all the flack that I would have taken.
Right.
Uh, he made the decisions I would have made and come. So when I got here, it was already a healthy church. It was a church ready to move forward.
Mm.
Um, and so over the last 2 years, what we've been able to do is capitalize on some of those changes that were implemented, grow in some of those areas, expand some of those things, and jump in and begin to really teach and preach the philosophy of why. Well, what are we even doing here? And so, and I think this is part of our discussion today too. I think having the smaller church and doing that has really benefited
Mm.
um, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and where we are going
I want to say
from that
this too. I
standpoint.
think this is interesting that you went from a tough situation, obviously a little bit of a bigger church and a big kind of school type ministry. So you're looking at this smaller church, but the advantage is that you're not going to have to try to fight your way through a complete philosophical overhaul. And that is
Right.
super important. If there's anybody listening that you're considering a shift, I've got emails in my inbox right now, guys talking about the philosophical shift, the challenges they're facing. It's kind of like my view is life's a fight, but every fight doesn't have to be against Mike Tyson.
Right. Yeah.
Some fights you got to position yourself to win. And if you're coming back from a challenge, real
Mhm.
hard thing, then you may not want to consider jumping into one that you're going to have to do the same thing over again and really just be pummeled again with the same battles. Because there are churches
Yeah.
out there like this one that's
Mhm.
ready for the move forward. And I will say this, the smaller the church, the smaller the budget, a lot of
Mhm.
times they realize their need to make some adjustments in order
Yeah.
to move forward. So that's a really, really good way to look at it. And now, 2 years in, I mean, you've obviously probably experienced some growth and some blessings. So let's just share a couple of those.
Yeah. So here we are, two years in. I wouldn't say that numerically we've experienced growth. As a
Mm.
matter of fact, just a little while ago, we actually purged our membership roles after the whole 2 year COVID thing, and took a little break from our membership uh, purging, I
Mm.
guess you could say, and cleansing out that we gave some grace because of staying at home and those things. So we just actually had a few weeks ago a moment with our church where we removed a number of people off of our membership rolls,
Mm.
which at first was a little discouraging through that. But then in the following weeks, in the last month, I've had 3 families join the church.
Amen. Amen.
And what I have seen, and I told my wife this morning in talking about this, one of the mindsets I came into this church with from experience now was patience. We're just going to set the groundwork. We're going to do what needs to be done in the church. I'm not going to try to focus on things that we can't do or things that we probably shouldn't do. We're going to focus on what does our church need right now. So, and 2 years in now, I've had 3 families that have joined and have not just joined, but engaged in the church.
That's awesome.
So meaningful growth has happened. And I would even go so far as to say the growth that we're experiencing is not so much numerical as I've had comments recently from my youth pastor and other members that they believe that the church is the healthiest it's ever been spiritually.
Oh, for sure.
And that tells me right there, well, we're primed for the Lord to add to his church.
Yeah.
And I keep telling the church, Acts 2, the Lord adds to the church.
Yeah, be
as we
careful.
do.
Be careful
supposed
to
to do.
not let your only metric be numeric growth. And I would say the same thing here. I mean, numerically, we're not much more than we were pre-COVID right now.
Yeah.
But the health and the depth and the exchange that is, some people
Yeah.
purge out, move on, and then God brings new, and you end up
Yeah.
realizing that right now, our church, I've been here now, this is my 7th year. And I'm like, I feel like we're just now at a point where I would even really actually want to even come to my own church, So,
Yeah.
and especially, you said something so wise there. When you're in a smaller congregation, you have to be honest about what you can do and what you should do. That is a really great statement. Most of us
Yeah.
had training in larger contexts. We were a part of larger churches. We see things, and if we're not careful, we want to replicate those things. We shouldn't be trying to replicate programs, and we should be trying to replicate philosophies. And then
Right.
God will build his church. And here's the reality. The reality is that the median church number in America is 65. Half the churches in America are smaller than 65. Half are greater. 1/2 of 1% are mega churches. Just let that sink in. 1/2 of 1% are mega churches, which is a lot of people. That's who they look to for growth. 70% of churches, 7 out of 10, are less than 100 in attendance. I mean, it's the reality.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that churches can't grow bigger, but the very sheer reality is most won't. So you have to learn. You have to learn how to minister in a small church, at least for a season, and in many cases for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of the, I guess, blessings that you have found in ministering in a smaller congregational setting?
The personal relationships with the members become much more easy to develop and to grow deeper in the small church context. Everybody knows everybody in this context. At Victory, it was a larger church. We were running 160 or so on Sunday morning. Here I'm running usually about 60 on Sunday morning, 60, 65. So I'm right at that median point.
You're right there, man.
I have the ability to be more actively involved in my church members' lives. The interaction, the fellowship on Sundays and Wednesdays is much better on a personal level because of the smaller. I don't feel like a CEO. I feel like a church member.
That's good.
Who happens to get up and preach. And there's so much value to that. There's the relationships I've been able to build over the last 2 years have been absolutely incredible.
It's interesting. I just checked this morning. I have this list updated each night automatically at 5 a.m. and we have about 275 members, regular attenders. And I got to tell you, in a meeting just that I had this week, I told people, look, there's a cap. There's a cap on your relational stretch, and all it means is the bigger you get, the more relationships you have to build into the church that are not with you.
Right.
Or otherwise people aren't going to be connected. And so I'm building a team of people that have responsibilities, most of them laymen. And my big relationships have to be with them in order for me to replicate the model. And so it's a bigger challenge. I mean, you're right. In a smaller church, the blessing is relationally, it's stronger. What would you say maybe some of the challenges that you found are?
I would say probably the biggest challenge is financial.
Mm.
Like you said earlier, coming out of a training and a mindset in a larger church context, finances aren't really that big of an issue, and so being able to do stuff was no problem. Well, now we're having to sit down and consider what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do. But I tell you, as much as that's a challenge, I think it's adjusting my approach to ministry, and that, if the Lord blesses to the point where we're growing and, we're up to the 200 mark or wherever, there's probably some things that I would sit back and go, do we really need to be doing that?
Absolutely.
Even though we have the money. So I think I'm starting to see the importance of weighing out, not just doing stuff because we can. But let's be more intentional, and that's what I have to be more intentional in my ministry, and that's a challenge.
Well, the more resources, properties, and people that you have, the more your allegiance to mission gets tested when it comes to finances. And I've got an episode, it's a couple episodes back, anybody can listen to, on a new way of looking at missions giving. And we've gone through it, and I don't want to rehash it here, but at the end of the day, I started seeing that we have 50,000 square foot property, 6 acres. We have all these people and all this stuff going on. Well, my missional challenge was that the dollars weren't adding up to what I was saying, meaning I want our church to be all about mission, but here we're spending far more resources on operation than mission. And we're in the process of changing that. And so you're right, it is a challenge because you're always having to watch that, because it's so easy. I want to hire this or hire that or do this or do that. And then all of a sudden you realize, man, you're not really pumping money into mission. And I think on a smaller scale, it's easier to be more careful and say, you know what, we're gonna focus here. We're gonna focus on this particular thing. And I like that. I think that is a tremendous way to look at it. Any other challenges come to your mind?
Well, it ties in with the financial aspect. Our church finances are a little tighter right now than they have been in the past.
Right.
And so I'm actually taking on a second job in the evenings. So this is a new one for me. I have never had to do this, never had to consider this. But I am. And so this is a challenge, but it's something that I think probably should be anticipated, if not expected, when you're dealing in a smaller church context. That for the sake of the church, I might have to sacrifice some things financially and time related
it's
in order to help the church stay healthy.
Absolutely. I mean, I do the same thing. I work more than one job, and I'm in a larger, technically medium-sized church, but I've decided that I know my church can't pay me what I need to make to raise 5 children and to do I know, so I don't even ask. So I'm intentional about other things. Somebody said this one time, co-vocational is probably the new normal for the vast majority of ministry. If 70% of the churches are under 100, man, the idea that you're going to make $70,000 and have full benefits and all your gas and your vehicle are going to be paid for, and they're going to pay for your vehicle as well, are probably in a lot of cases gone.
Yeah.
So being willing to do that, I was meeting with some pastors and elders at a church one time, and they were going through some challenges, some loss, smaller church, two pastors on staff plus a secretary, I believe. And some of the elder group was trying to encourage some of the employees to consider taking a reduction, and these guys got kind of, or at least one of them got all worked up about this, and these men were telling me this and asking me how to proceed. And I just gave them a caution. I said, it's just a real problem if there's somebody, an employee of the church, who sees the church in a financial pinch and is not willing to himself consider doing something different, taking a side job so that he can make his ends meet and not put the weight on the church. And I don't know if there is a church out there, Stephen, that doesn't have financial pressure, particularly right now.
Yeah.
And I admire you for that, and I think that more guys need to consider doing that. Hey, listen, if you don't make enough money, don't pout about it. Go get a job.
Yeah.
Go use other training. Go. You know, there's all kinds of ways to make money, and on your own time, even.
Sure.
You could pick up. I mean, literally, you could pick up $1,000 a month on Uber pretty easily. You know, just as an example. And so I admire that. I think that's great, which obviously led me, which was the next question, some adjustments you've needed to make in your approach. This is obviously one that you're feeling like I'm going to need to, share my time. But in all reality, Stephen, I think we'd all admit that even in my church, a little bit bigger, I mean, does it require 60 hours a week of work? Probably not. Probably not. Sometimes, of course, it goes up and down, but there's probably some space in there to do some of those things. But any other adjustments come to mind that you feel like, would be healthy to consider when you're thinking about a small church?
Well, one of the things that I think has become really helpful to us is realizing that I don't have to do everything, even in a small church setting. So with this new job I'm taking on, so I'll be working Wednesday nights. So Tuesday to Saturday, I'll be working at nights. So that takes our Wednesday night setup format and removes me from the equation.
Wow.
So what do we do in that situation? Well, I've got 2 deacons that are able to teach and lead. I've got a youth pastor that's able to teach and lead. I've got other men in my church who can step in and fill that role. And so being willing to hand things over to them and just say, it's yours, run with it, trust them to do it is extremely helpful.
That's great.
I have no concerns about my church going forward on Wednesday nights because one of my deacons that's taken the lead on it, is he's already come to me with a plan. This is what I want to do. This is how I want it to function and work. Sounds great. It's exactly what I would want.
Amen.
So let's roll with it and be willing to lean on other people, especially if you have to go into a bivocational position. Be willing to do that. But also, I came into the church and I let all the men know when I was candidating, my desire is that every man in our church be able to teach. And so they had that expectation set from the beginning, even before the beginning. They had that expectation set right away. I'm going to teach you and train you and equip you to be able to take my spot if I'm not able to be there.
That's really, really healthy and good. Mark Dever's book, Discipling, is an excellent book, and he talks a lot about this, and I would highly recommend that book. Pick it up. Okay, tell us about how your family helps you serve. You got some older children, and your wife, of course. I mean, how in this smaller setting do you guys work together as a team?
Really, our church is unique in this small setting way where they don't expect a lot of my wife and kids. That's good. As far as ministry, they understand that when they called me, they hired me. They did not hire my wife.
It's good.
And that was important for us. So my wife is free to kind of engage where she desires. So my wife is doing things, interacting with the ladies in the church. She's trying to work right now in building a women's ministry within our church, the ladies ministry. And that I think is going to grow into some things. We're talking with a ministry right now that I believe you're working with, the Start a Single Moms group.
Oh yeah.
The ministry in our area. So we're working on that, which my wife and a couple other ladies would lead and take on. My family primarily is heavily involved in the music
Yeah.
ministry with our church. One daughter Lily plays the ukulele. My wife's the piano. Josh and Gracie sing.
Mm.
And I'm standing back there thumping away on the bass guitar.
Nice.
And so we serve together as a family with the music ministry.
And that's great.
And
That's
so,
great.
yeah.
Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap this with this question. A lot of guys listening are going to be in your position at some point. They're either going to transition between ministries, they're going to end up in a smaller ministry, or they're going to be in their first pastorate. You were in a rare situation. You hardly ever see a guy take a larger church with a full-blown Christian school in their first role. It's just unrealistic. I've worked with so many guys. They just have unrealistic expectations, like you're going to pastor a church of 200 when you're 25, and just everybody's going to want, it's just very unique. It's almost unheard of. The very fact is, you're either going to start a church, you're going to take a broken church, or you're going to take a small church that is in a position that they would actually even consider you. So what advice would you give for a guy that's going to definitely be coming into the same kind of role and experience that you are?
Be patient with what church you would take.
It's good.
And I would say be picky about what church you would take. After our experience at Victory, Holly and I were very, very, and that's important that what I just said, Holly and I both, my wife and I both were very picky about what church and what kind of a church we would take philosophically. So when I went into candidating, I asked them as many questions, if more questions than they asked me.
That is so good. That is good.
Be picky about what church you're going to take. If I had known then what I know now, I would have asked a whole lot more questions and probed a whole lot deeper before I went to Victory.
Yep. Oh, yes. Patient and picky. Those are good words of advice, and I would echo them. Absolutely. Young guys, if they're not careful, they can kind of get in a hurry, and they can can almost, for the sake of getting a position, put themselves in a bad position. So that is tremendous. Stephen, as always, of course, good to talk to you, but it's especially good to have you on the Bryan Sam's podcast. And so thank you for joining us today. To my listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, where we have more talks on life, ministry, and leadership, this is the Bryan Sam's podcast.